think we're ready to begin. Hi, my name is Renee Hobbs, and I'm here with Pam Stager and some of the members of the Media Education Lab, and we want to tell you about our new research project. It's called Media Literacy in Rhode Island, a statewide survey. And of course, we're very happy that you're here as part of Media Literacy Week. Michelle, thank you for making the National Media Literacy Week be so spectacular. And many of the people in this room, including Erin McNeil and Michelle and Colleen and Samantha and Frank and Michael, you're all rocking and rolling this week with media literacy, and we're glad you are. So I guess, Pam, what we thought we would start by doing is talking about, what made us crazy enough to think that we could do this.
Yeah, well, you know what they say, follow the money. We had an opportunity for some funding from URI to do a research project, and it had to be with somebody from the university and a community partner. And since I was state coordinator of Media Literacy Now Rhode Island, we became the community partner that got to dictate what I wanted to see in a survey about media literacy in Rhode Island, which was kind of a dream come true.
Now, for people who don't know, Pam, this is kind of a long form of advocacy, a long game that we're playing. Can you tell us about the 2017 law passed by the General Assembly?
Sure. Well, you know, as especially Erin McNeil knows, when you want to get a foot in the door, you do legislation that is low key and doesn't ask for a lot of money and just asks for the Rhode Island Department of Ed to consider integrating media literacy into the school, into the education plan. And also in this case, it mentioned partnering with national and local media literacy experts. And we were very excited in 2017 to get the bill through the House and Senate and the General Assembly in Rhode Island, and then signed into law by Governor Gina Raimondo. And then our calls just kept getting unanswered, and RIDE, even though we understand that they had a lot of things going on, it was really disappointing to just get crickets from them for a long time. There was a change in superintendent, there was a takeover of the Providence school system, there were a lot of priorities, and then there was a pandemic.
So we cut them a little bit of slack, right?
We cut them a lot of slack all the way along the way. That was 2018. This is 2021. So we decided to turn up the heat a bit.
Yeah, and now it's true that you can find media literacy competencies in the media arts standards, in the library standards, in the English language arts standards, in the social studies and health education standards, but you got to look for them, right? And we were hoping for a little bit coherent. So we created it. Right. We created it. This was our research question. We wondered, how often do students in Rhode Island, elementary or secondary schools, encounter media literacy through its core instructional practices, right? And that's because we recognized the big problem that teachers and school leaders and community members do not know what media literacy entails. So we wanted to design a piece of research that would actually help promote public understanding of what media literacy instruction looks like. So Pam, how come this project is a baseline and a blueprint for advancing media literacy?
Well, one of the things I was really interested in was, as everyone on this call knows, I was tired of having to explain what media literacy is to everybody that I mentioned what I do to. So a big part of what I wanted this survey to do was to really push that ball a little bit further up the hill, to get as many Rhode Islanders as possible to really truly get what media literacy is and what it looks like in the classroom.
Yep. And so we really reached out to a wide spectrum of Rhode Islanders. As you can see, we had 524. Remember, this is a very small state, you guys. There's only 1 million people in the entire state, right? So this is a small sample of 524 Rhode Islanders. 56% identify as educators in the state. 33% are librarians. 7% are school leaders. 25% were parents. 32% were community members, and 5% were elected public officials. And we really wanted to measure whether media literacy was happening in elementary and secondary schools by looking multi-perspectively, because we think that you need to look at the issue from a lot of different points of view, not just the position of school leaders, not just the position of superintendents, not just the position of educators, but all of these stakeholders. So Pam, one of the first questions we wondered about was, why the heck do these people think media literacy is important? What's noteworthy about the findings here from your point of view?
Well, I think this is pretty standard. I don't think people who know media literacy will be very surprised by this ranking. And I think what was most disappointing to us was that unleash creativity, self-expression, and confidence was way down at the bottom.
At the very bottom.
At the very bottom. We feel as though that's such an important part of media literacy, is the creation, the self-expression part, and we were sorry to see it down there.
That being said, we understand how the fake news crisis has created this perception that media literacy is an antidote to that, and that's certainly what these findings reveal. Now, what we decided to do for our methodology was present to the survey respondents 16 instructional practices of media literacy, which we briefly described in a sentence. And we asked, are students in your school district and your community, are they getting the chance to do this instructional practice? And so we report results, the results that we're going to share with you. We report these results based on how likely it is that the people in this state think this pedagogy, this instructional practice is happening. Are a few students getting this media literacy instructional practice? Some or most, right? And so you can kind of see a little bit of the framework that we use to evaluate the data. Let's take a look at the findings from the elementary school level. We asked participants to whether or not 4 instructional practices were part of the elementary school experience for Rhode Island kids. Tell a story, compare and contrast, how media messages influence, and images and advertising. And so I'll talk about, the one that came to the top of the list. 29% of participants said that most or nearly all kids in their community were getting the opportunity to adapt a book into a media genre, including animation, video game, or video, creating a storyboard or a script to depict an imaginary world with characters, conflict, and a sequence of events. That's only 1 in 3, but hey, it's something. Pam, what was noteworthy for you looking at this?
And it's a lot better than the 17% that think that images and advertising, that students interpret different types of advertising to examine how images can be manipulated, and then they reflect on how advertising affects attitudes and behaviors. In our book, The Library Screen Scene, I tell a story about my 4-year-old grandson who could get the understanding whether a message is trying to tell him something or sell him something. I think kids with their early start in visual media and digital media need to understand this, and it was disappointing to me to see that so low figure in elementary school, where I think it's elementary.
Yeah, given the barrage of advertising that kids get exposed to, it is startling that is so low. All right, let's talk about media literacy in the middle school. We asked participants to tell us whether these 4 activities were happening in the middle school. Examine the news, stereotypes, team-based production, and balancing an offline and online life. Pam, what was noteworthy about these results?
Yeah, I feel as though at middle school level, stereotypes is a really important thing to explore, because I think it's a time in kids' development and youth development where they're really trying to figure out who they are. And there's a lot of, bullying and name calling and a lot of stereotyping going on. So students analyze examples of different types of media to spot stereotypes and examine how values and ideologies are embedded in characters and stories. I think that's important.
And one in four is not, I mean, it could be worse, right?
It could be worse.
So the way to interpret this chart is that 1 in 4 students are likely to, most of the students or nearly all of the students in a school district are likely to get this opportunity. To me, one of the big surprises, Pam, was balancing online and offline life. Some of you know that digital citizenship competencies are required to get the special E-rate funding in public education. And of course, balancing online and offline life is a component of digital citizenship. Students keeping track of their media use over a period of time and discussing how media might be beneficial or harmful to their health, identity, and relationships. But that's only happening in 16% of Rhode Island communities. So that was pretty much another strangely disappointing finding.
And I think especially during, since this was about the 2020 school year, really, because we did it over the summer. So thinking in terms of 2020 and all the online activity that education that was happening then, that was especially surprising.
That's a great point. The kids were on screens more than ever before in their young lives, and we still weren't talking about balancing online and offline life. All right, we asked participants to assess 8 activities in the high school, because while media literacy happens at the elementary grades and happens at the middle school, by high school, there's a lot of different instructional practices that are highly relevant for adolescents. So the very single best news we got was that 2/3 of students in Rhode Island get an opportunity to learn how to generate questions and gather information from multiple sources to learn something new, and then summarize what they learned by creating a written work, a video, an oral presentation, a podcast, an infographic, or other media project. Nobody in this room is surprised by that finding, right? That high school students get an opportunity to do a research. And of course, there's a little wiggle room there, because as you can see, the work product that students create could be a written work. So they could analyze print media sources and complete this project in a perfectly fine way. Pam, what was noteworthy in these findings for you?
Well, I really loved our question about music and cultural values. We asked whether students have a chance to explore music from different time periods to identify how it reflects social values and activates strong emotions in ways that build consensus on controversial political issues. My experience in K through 12, and especially with offices in high schools and dealing a lot with high school students, the music world is where they spend a heck of a lot of time. And, once again, maybe 1 in 4 high school students are getting something like this, or at least that's our participants' opinion. But I think it should be more than that, because I think it's where they live.
Yeah, thanks for that really important point. Of course, I love that question because the way it taps into the power of popular culture to motivate engagement, and teachers all over the country have understood the deep ways in which explorations of popular culture can engage and motivate kids for learning. We asked 4 more questions, as you can see here, about high school learners. Did students get the opportunity to present a strong point of view? Learn about the First Amendment and other laws that empower them as citizens in a democracy, and apply social responsibility as creators and consumers of messages? Create a public service announcement, working collaboratively on a topic to develop a campaign designed to raise awareness or promote a cause or motivate people to take action in the community. And then learning about the business of media, right? How advertising is targeted to increase its effectiveness and how selling audience attention is the way companies make money. What was noteworthy from your point of view, Pam, in these findings?
Well, I remember you saying that the media law and policy was an important one for you, tied to the business of media. You know, in Rhode Island, only 40% of our population have any higher education. And a lot of students, high school is their last chance at this kind of education in many cases. And that's not counting the dropouts. So I just think that this kind of the law and policy and business aspects of media literacy are really important lifelong skills.
What a great observation. Okay, so now don't you see how we taught the survey respondents what media literacy looks like, right? We taught them. Here are 16 ways that media literacy, these are 16 different ways media literacy can be taught. But another thing we tried to do was we tried to understand the context in which, and the communities in which we work. Like everywhere, Rhode Island is very diverse for its small size. And so we wanted to ask participants about how they might have experienced obstacles and challenges. Like for instance, the technology challenges that might influence them. And so we basically decided that if you identified a lot of challenges, that was not a good thing. And if you identified few challenges, then that was okay. And so we looked at how different respondents in different communities identified challenges, but not just about technology. We also asked about student readiness and school culture. We used a total of 19 variables to address school culture. So Pam, what was noteworthy about these results?
Well, I've found under student readiness, the students lack interest thing to be counter to what my experience is in doing media literacy in schools. I have just never had an experience where I think students are not interested in the topics of media literacy, in the practices and skills of media literacy. So, you know, I'm hoping that in our academic paper, we can dive further into some of this research and see who was saying that of our
1 in 3 participants were saying that students lack interest. Yeah. And what does that mean? We need to understand that better. It could be lack interest in school overall, but it could be something else. One of the things that startled me, but was something that we did recognize, was the way in which everyone in this survey perceived that the focus on test scores in reading and math was the primary obstacle. Over and over in our interviews, we conducted 30 interviews, long form interviews with all different participants, and over and over, there's no time, we have to do test prep, was a kind of mantra there. And you can see 60% identified this as a obstacle. With the second coming up, other priorities more urgent. And Pam, you described what some of those were, obviously, in the run up to this presentation. So now we want to kind of teach you how to read the report card, and we're going to talk a little bit about the results. We're looking at the town of Barrington, Rhode Island here. As we interpret these results, you can see that at the elementary school, few students get any media literacy exposure. At the middle school, some students get media literacy exposure. And at the high school, few students get media literacy exposure. So for that, they earned a C. But because all 3 of their climate scores were high, that is, the participants, the people from Barrington, the teachers, the school leaders, the elected public officials, the librarians, the parents, because the people in that community said, we don't have any obstacles with technology. We don't have any obstacles with student readiness. We don't have any obstacles with school culture, because they got such high scores for that. We gave them a C+. Now it's, oh, go ahead, Pam.
I just want to point out to the non-Rhode Islanders that Barrington is a bedroom community to Providence. It's where most of our management people who work in the city live with their families. It's got a yacht club, and it's considered one of the best school districts in the state.
Nice. And let me just also point out that for the report card scores, we didn't use any qualitative data at all. Sometimes people ask us, oh, well, don't you have a bias toward these towns? And didn't your, how did you come up with these scores? And so we didn't use any of our qualitative data in making the report card. The report card comes, only the people in Barrington report on these findings. So these findings are according to the people who live and work in that town, right? And I feel like that's a really interesting aspect of the methodology that we would like to try to replicate. Now, there were some towns where we just didn't get good response rate, like in Block Island or Wakefield or Little Compton or Jamestown or Middletown. We had 5 or fewer respondents to the survey, and we didn't feel like we could report a report card finding with that small number of people. But one of the most interesting findings was, of course, the significant disparities between communities. Here's the report card for West Warwick Public Schools. And you can see, according to the participants who live and work in West Warwick, most or all students in the elementary grades are getting media literacy. Most or all students in the middle school are getting media literacy, and most or all students in the high school are getting media literacy. At the same time, their climate scores are really good. They don't think there's obstacles due to technology. They don't see obstacles about school readiness, and they don't see obstacles to school culture. So that's our only A+, right, Pam? But that was not the norm. The disparities that we found are really absolutely fascinating. And this chart gives you a good sense of that, right?
And we've got 5 minutes to 7:30, Renee.
Okay, good show. So we're steaming to the end here. You can see that in Exeter, West Greenwich, at the bottom of the list, students aren't getting media literacy in elementary school or middle school or high school. And so if it wasn't happening anywhere, we gave you a D, right? But we were pretty aware of how to fix this problem. Pam, how do you interpret this quote from one of our survey participants?
Well, let me read it first. Media literacy could be woven into most classes, but the successful implementation would be most effective through teacher buy-in. Only if teachers feel this is valuable and work to educate themselves will they be able to transmit their knowledge to their students. And this certainly underscored something that we've been saying all along, is that we need teachers to, most of all, to understand media literacy so that they can help their students understand it. And that's why Renee's been running a summer institute for how many years, Renee?
10.
We're training as many Rhode Island and other area, and sometimes from other countries, educators in media literacy and digital literacy. And yeah, we think we really do feel as though it can be cross-curricular.
Yeah, absolutely. In the report, we make recommendations to school leaders, and we say they should prioritize media literacy competencies in their district strategic goals and their school improvement plans. We say that educators and librarians could create a district-wide cross-curricular map to develop a scope and sequence for embedding these 16 core instructional practices into the PK to 12 curriculum. We think parents and community members should use a wider range of media literacy activities in the home. We're not, because of time, we're not talking to you a little bit about what we learned about media literacy practices in the home, but the only thing parents are doing is co-viewing, right? And that's just not enough. And for public officials and philanthropic leaders, we think it's important to expand those fiscal resources to enable schools to develop a leadership cadre in the school district so that a crew of people can collaborate to advance media literacy learning opportunities for all students. And then we think media professionals have a role to play, especially by showcasing examples of young people and educators and librarians who are demonstrating their media literacy competencies to raise awareness of the power of media literacy through creative media production. So it's a baseline and a blueprint, and now we have about 8 minutes for questions. I'll stop sharing, and you might have comments and you might have questions. The floor is yours.
There's been a nice chat going on. Go ahead. Who's got a question?
Or a comment?
Well, there was definitely a question about what kind of funding we need in other to do a survey in other states. Rhode Island's pretty small, so I'm thinking that to do it in, say, Illinois, it's going to cost more. But what do you think? How much do we need?
We spent $6,000.
6,000?
Yeah.
We spent $6,000.
And I don't think we didn't spend what we spent our money on was our amazing student researchers that we hired, 2 from the university and 1 when Renee put out the call, who pleaded to be involved, a graduate student from China at Columbia University. And they were just great in helping us out. So, you know, and they helped us develop the survey and administer the survey, and they did the interviews, the follow-up interviews. So other than time for that, Erin, with a bigger state, I don't see how it would need to cost a lot more. And you could do the survey without the follow-up interviews with a lot less time.
It did take a lot of volunteer time, though, it sounds like, from the leaders.
No, not us, never.
We paid ourselves about 20 cents a minute, an hour.
Lower. Seems reasonable.
Anybody else? I saw the question, the comment about parents. Could parents appreciate this report and use it to encourage administrators? In our outreach, Sam, we outreach to the Rhode Island Parent Associations and asked them to distribute the survey. We sent it to all of our school superintendents and asked them to distribute. We sent it to every list we could come up with. Our graduate students, Tessa was from the East Bay, and she was an MLIS candidate. And Jenny was from North Providence, living in Kingston, and a history major. You know, they sent it to everybody they knew, and we posted it everywhere we could. But we included parents a lot and talked to the heads of those organizations, telling them that we really wanted their input.
Yeah, one thing that I'm really proud of is the survey continues to be open, because it's possible that you'll read the survey and you'll go, oh, I don't think this really captures the complexity of my community. And that could be. After all, it's only 524 people who participated. So the survey continues to be open as people in Rhode Island can continue to, if they haven't yet completed the survey, they can complete the survey. And we're hoping to be able to do this annually for the next 3 years, because we think that taking this, our working hypothesis now is that taking the survey is a consciousness raising activity, right? That makes you have a more concrete understanding of what media literacy looks like in a classroom. And if you know what it looks like in a classroom, then you might be able to explain that, right, to others. And so we think that it's possible that a survey like this done over 3 years could actually build more consensus and more momentum for media literacy. So that's why, one of the reasons why we hope to be able to do this annually, to measure, to see if we can, to see if this can be a lever to promote change at the local and school district level.
I see that one of the things that Marta wrote before she left was that we were very brave to have done this project.
Marta, why do you think we were brave to have done this project?
Well, you can imagine all the obstacles that most of the people have, you know, talking about this only. I mean, it's like, it takes guts to get out there and do it. And at the same time, you're educating people, you're letting them know if they didn't even know about it. And, you know, all the variables too are just, this is very good food.
Yeah. You know, Marta, one of the things we were scared about, so we were scared because we were like, what happens when the wealthy affluent districts see the C next to their school name, and
Or
are we
the
going to get
superintendents
complaints?
that we've been trying to make a relationship with? Like, are we, you know, cutting ourselves off, you know, from that? So I think that was the part that I thought we were brave on, and Renee and I had a lot of back and forth about that.
We did. And we ultimately relied on the wisdom of Garrison Keillor. You remember in the famous Prairie Home Companion, if you're old enough to remember the Prairie Home Companion, he used to tell a story about in Lake Wobegon, all the children are above average. And we realized that if we produced a feel-good report, well, that we could have produced a report that said, at least a few kids in Rhode Island are getting, I mean, we would have great numbers for that. 80%, 90%. If we had said, well, a few kids in Rhode Island are getting, or even some, right? But no, we decided that what we really wanted to hold ourselves to is this expectation that most kids or all kids get this, and that it wasn't good enough if just some kids got this. So by setting the bar high, we recognized that we could risk people being a little alienated, but we also realized that that really represents what we're aiming for, right? We want every kid in Rhode Island to get these learning opportunities. All right, I think we now want to do our pivot, if it's okay.
Just before you go, Michelle Linford put 2 questions. Could we share this survey with their coalition that she's doing in her state? And Renee's summer resources, are there other professional development curricula we should share with the coalition? We can send you answers to those questions, Michelle, but yes, we plan on sharing the survey, right, Renee?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we're going to give it to anybody who wants to use it, and, you know, write import in Survey Monkey, all ready to go. Boom, boom, click, click, click. Because
Wonderful. Thank you.
we really think, you know what I want, Michelle? I want a school district superintendent to require every staff member to complete the survey. So that
this coalition that we're in is bringing a lot of people together. And as you talk about it being both an assessment tool and an educational tool, it's exactly the kind of thing to get some good conversations going. And it would save me a lot of work in trying to, because some people just don't have any exposure to it really. Right. So even within the educational system.
Right. We're with you on that. We're happy to have you use it and try it out and share your findings with us.
So let me be auntie for a second and put my question that was very politely ignored, but I'll put it anyway.
I didn't see it. Yeah,
what do you think that because you can imagine my thought about the fail and the C, and so I understand the rhetoric of like being efficient and people, but I also look at the shame element in it, and I wonder if that's really going to reach the goal of what all of us want to get by doing that.
Yeah, such a great point. And we talked for hours about this, didn't we, Pam? Our team went over this topic quite a lot, because after all, fundamentally, I would prefer not to grade. I don't like grading. Grading is the least fun part of my job, right? And so from my point of view, couldn't we produce these findings without making it be a report card? But then we realized that, look, the language of the way we think about public education is rooted in assessment, right? And accountability. And that it would be too easy to ignore this evidence if it didn't speak the language of the mainstream. The mainstream discourse in public education is about assessment and accountability. And we decided that we could use that, even though, like you said, that brings along a lot of baggage that isn't really what we care about and isn't really what we value. And I think researchers could make different calls on that and still use the survey, right? So you could implement it in your community and you wouldn't have to give grades.
I mean, we talked at one point in time about using, kindergarten style grades, like needs improvement or.
We did. But think about it this way. There are 35 variables that's very complex. 35 variables. There's 16 instructional practices and 19 challenges and obstacles. We were able to reduce that to a single number. And that is a form of data reduction that can be really useful for policy purposes, right?
And also a side effect may be that it'll get superintendents to rethink the grading system as a best way of assessment.
Yeah, I doubt that, but I'm really curious as you're doing like the pioneering work to also hear about the feedback you're receiving, like good or bad, or backlash, or to see, and different communities, I'm sure, will address it differently. So
yeah. Yanti, we're holding on. Both Pam and I have received emails already. So we're documenting that with that. And you're right, that may be another study.
But we've also received, emails and calls from other community partners who want to talk to us about other funding possibilities. So, since we left the survey open and we're talking about in terms of making it annual, the Rhode Island Council for the Humanities wants to talk to us. We're trying to get in the door at the Rhode Island Foundation to get bigger money to continue doing things.
Yeah, so it is getting some attention. And now I see our colleague Mary Moen is joining us. Mary was also a team member. Welcome, Mary. Before I turn it over to Yanti and Mike, Sam, I wonder if you have any reflections or commentary on learning about this project and thinking about this project in relation to your leadership in media literacy.
Well, of course, like pretty much everyone here, I would love to see this duplicated in every state and every country, or, I don't know how most countries are set up as far as like dictating or deciding on what is taught. But this answers so many questions about, where are teachers and where are students, especially in places around the country where media literacy is on the radar, or some form of literacy, whether it's media literacy, information literacy, digital literacy, fill in the blank literacy, just really getting the pulse of what are people's understanding and what is already happening in the classroom just seems to be so important. So I think this kind of project is definitely important in places like Illinois that has just begun to put media literacy front and center in priorities. So yeah, one of the questions that I was thinking about as you were talking, and I don't know this about the study, is how difficult or how easy was it to get teachers to participate? If I would imagine that teachers would be both very busy, right? And so getting their attention might be difficult, but also really excited to finally have someone asking these questions who's going to amplify their voice. So I know that's not the question that you asked, but I'd love to know that.
Now that's a perfect segue to talking about the role of the librarians in our study, because we did get very great, very high quality data. We asked a lot of open-ended questions and people answered with paragraphs. Mary, can you talk a little bit about what you saw in the data as it related to the way that the school librarians responded to this survey and how they engaged with it?
And just briefly, Mary, because we have three other presenters we need to get in. And unmute.
There we go. Yeah, so, well, to Samantha's question, we did get the survey out at the end of last year and people were tired and things. So we made a lot of effort to reach out to people we knew, and I sent a lot of reminders to the school library community asking them to take it and also to share it with their teachers. And we did get a considering that there's so few school librarians, the percentage that responded was quite high, which we were really happy about, because this is the work that they are doing and they want to do in collaboration with other teachers. So I was really excited to see them so engaged and talking about it. And yeah, we even have recommendations for the school library community in Rhode Island to create resources for teachers, educators to use. And so we're bringing them in and making them a part of this whole, like giving them some agency here too.
Yeah. Now, Yanti and Mike, we're gonna throw it to you to talk a little bit about yet another statewide initiative, and that is the Illinois Media Literacy Coalition. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Sure. So I'll go in a different route. We had a talk, Mike and I, with a PR company, one of the biggest one in Chicago. I think it was 2-3 days ago. And their question all the time, again and again and again, was like, so what is the percentage? Who is doing media literacy in the state? How they're doing it? What? And I was like, like, there is on Wednesday, there's a webinar about Rhode Island. We could replicate it to Illinois, but at this point, we actually don't have the answers. I said, I can anecdotally say here and there. And that's why what you're sharing here is so important, because we're looking to see how to replicate it. So that's like, just the segue to what we're going to talk about, but it's so needed. Like, that's what, the press, policymakers, that's what they want. They want like the numbers. They want to have the report and to have the bottom line. And what we're saying, it's important, you should. It's like, yeah, but where are the numbers to back it up? So that's just, so what we did is we're a part of initiative thanks to Media Literacy Now. And I think, Erin, you'll correct me, but Alicia Haywood worked for like 5 years, I think, to get the legislation like on the works with different partners.
Auntie, what is the legislation?
So the legislation is very interesting, and I think it's a little bit different than, I don't know if it's the regular, but other legislation. First of all, it defines media literacy, which is interesting, and then describe 5 practices that, not surprisingly, are impacted by your research, Renee, and the language that I, at the end, helped to put it there. And basically, after defining what is the definition and how it looks like, mandate that starting next year, every high school will need to teach a unit without defining what does it mean, which is actually innovative and very forward thinking. Then instead of having a media literacy teacher, it can be embedded in any subject matter, which is super cool. And saying that the Board of Education need to provide resources, but that's it. It's very short, and it passed in the summer, was signed by the governor in the end of July or beginning of August. And so as a group of us, Mike and I, that were leading this coalition that we're calling it now, we're thinking, okay, great, we have the legislation, we have a year, but then different people describe, oh, we're doing media literacy, but they're doing news literacy, or they're doing digital literacy or digital citizenship, and not exactly. And that's where we had the idea of what you just shared, that is the framework. So I'll let Mike explain like the framework and where we headed with it.
Yeah, so like Yanti was saying, we have been we both have been long-time practitioners in the field and now scholars in the field, and something we really were reflecting on was that there are probably a lot of teachers out there that was, if you were to ask them, oh yeah, you do this media literacy thing, they'd be like, oh yeah, we do that. Like, I go on this website, I grab this worksheet, my students do this all the time, right? But it may be all of these other sort of iterations of what media literacy may be. And one of the things that we also realize is that this isn't only skills for students to learn, but these are also skills that the teachers need to learn, the administrators need to learn. And one of the ways that we really started thinking about how can we bring this information to hopefully the whole state in a way that's, understandable and that's not totally scary for all of these teachers, is through sort of trying to identify some of the core aspects that we see as overlaps in all of the different iterations of media literacy that the both of us have been involved with. So that's what really drove this idea of developing a framework, not trying to say like, oh, here's another curriculum, because we know there's lots of curriculum out there. We wanted to just give them an opportunity to see what are some of the things that are core to media literacy, and then could they use those to then say, okay, I'm using this thing and it aligns with this. This could be ways for us to think about the development of standards or other ways for approaching media literacy in the state.
Wow, how totally cool. So Erin, we want to get your take on the whole enterprise here. You've been a pioneer in making media literacy a policy issue. How do you see the future in relation to the initiatives in Rhode Island, in Illinois, and perhaps in other states?
That's a big question, Renee. Yeah, what Yanti and Michael are doing in Illinois, I think they've really taken advantage of this law that's been passed. And that's what we'd like to see happen, is these laws are not the beginning and end. That's the starting point. And it allows advocates to jump in there and make a stand, make a statement, provide resources. So the law says a unit. So what happens is when the Illinois Media Literacy Coalition shows up and says, here you go, here's the framework, here's what you should be teaching, that becomes what the law means. It means you implement this framework, K through 12. You can start it in elementary school. Why wait to high school? So it's really, they're taking advantage of the opportunity of this bill that Alicia Haywood got started years ago. So, it's like you drop the pebble into the pond and it just keeps expanding. So thank you for that, and congratulations. Also, Rhode Island, great work. This is really going to help expand our work, the model that you created and the survey, and I can't wait to see how it gets implemented in other states. It's really so ready to just roll out right now because you've got all the questions and you've got the model of how you then report it out. So it may even cost less if you can get the right volunteers and students on it, but we're here to help disseminate that and to help out with whatever sort of other help you need in the States. So also in Rhode Island, you have modestly not mentioned that you have there's some litigation going on in terms of civics education, which includes a media literacy element, and that will move to the next higher court on Monday. So we'll be looking forward to that. And yeah, so Rhode Island's really seeing a lot of action, and that's great news. So what else is happening? There are lots of other states doing interesting, exciting things. So we're excited to report on that. And Michelle Linford actually just mentioned that she's making some progress in Utah. So that's great news. Also this year.
Oh yeah, go ahead. I was going to ask, tell us about Washington State.
Yeah, so also this year, Washington State has made some tremendous progress. They started years ago, again, getting an initial bill passed, and the advocates out there really grabbed onto that and kept pushing it forward. So at this point this year, they were able to get the legislature to provide a commitment of 10 years of funding. And that's for grants that go to school districts. So for the first 2 years, it's $400,000. So 2 times 5 times 400, that's over $1 million. almost, anyway, so they also, so.
It's late at
Go
night.
into this
girl.
for the
Don't-
math, it's the
don't
literacy.
need to do the math now.
They have just announced that they have a new position in the, essentially what's their DOE, the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, and that is a media literacy program supervisor. So that's the first ever there. And in fact, I think the first that I've heard of anywhere. So congratulations to
Yeah.
Washington. Other states, what do we have? Colorado also passed a law this year that requires that the DOE provide new standards in reading, writing, and civics that include media literacy, provide resources, and also another important step, provide technical assistance to the districts. So love it. Yeah.
Wow. Right. Well, so you know what you should be thinking at the end of, as we reach the end of this program, is yes, our news in Rhode Island is 1 in 3 schools offers most or all students the opportunity to critically analyze the news. Right? That's our finding. 1 in 5 schools offer students the opportunity to critically analyze advertising and understand the business of media. But Malcolm Gladwell told us that once we got to 30%, we would reach something he called the tipping point. He said, you know, when social change happens, it happens gradually, and then it happens fast. And so I do feel like we're closer to the tipping point now than at any point in my lifetime. And part of that is because of the advocates and the teachers and the scholars and the folks who are right here in this room, in this call today. And so we should just realize that this work is huge, but boy, the momentum is trending in the right direction. So.
Hey, Renee, I just want to mention before we go to, I'm wondering about, I know that in the academic report, we'll be, you know, talking a lot more about what we learned in the process of this whole research study, but I'm wondering if we're going to share the survey, whether we can share a little tiny bit of what we learned. Like, I think maybe making it a little shorter than the survey that we did would be a good idea. So how will they be able to edit the survey? Is that going to be a possibility?
Absolutely. So Michelle, you're going to send me an email, put my email address in the chat, but you have it, right? Hobbs@URI. You're going to send me an email and say, can I have a copy of the survey? And I'm going to give you a copy of the survey, and then you'll have complete control to decide, do you want to edit? Do you want to modify? Do you want to change? You know, go at it, right? So we're not being, what is it called? Proprietary.
Yeah.
We don't want any barriers to stand in the way of people using this tool.
And the other thing is that we used an iPad, you know, like if you took the survey and you wanted to have your name put into the pool for an iPad, that was our incentive. I noticed that in the Sea Change survey, they provided a $5 Starbucks gift certificate to every educator who took the survey. So you might want to think about incentives, or at least put it into a funding proposal if you're going to make one.
Yeah. And so Pam, that's another good point, is that we could do little consultancies. If you want to use the survey, we've got 10 tips. And we'd be happy to pass them on. We're not going to do that in this call though, because you stayed a whole hour with us and it's 8 o'clock at night, and there's more media literacy happening at 8 o'clock if you're totally into the Zoom thing. Otherwise, I just want to thank my partners in crime, Mary Moen, Pam Stager, our research assistants, Wrongway Tang, Jenny Sullivan, and Tessa Mediano. We had a great creative team, and it was a lot of fun building this project. So thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm Renee Hobbs of the Media Education Lab. Hopefully we'll see you next time. Happy Media Literacy Week, you guys. Bye-bye.